Hey folks, Ronnie Turner here with you once again from the Prophecy Freak YouTube channel. This week we've got an update from, we got a couple of clips. First being a SkyWatch news clip talking about a new body entering our solar system and what astronomers and scientists are looking for as far as that goes and what impact that might have on us. So I want you guys to see this and be aware of it.
Surprise. Astronomers are searching for a comet or something out there that could be responsible for an unexpected meteor shower over New Zealand on New Year's Eve, that is. Scientists around the world looking out for the parent body of those meteoroids. Now, obviously, scientists want to know what trajectory that parent body is taking. The meteor shower had never been seen before, had never been tracked on radar, which suggests that a new body has entered the solar system, as yet undetected. And we can already hear people uploading YouTube videos about Planet X. Well, prophecy. Things are coming.
Next, we've got Pastor Paul Begley with his update on the comets that are coming close to Earth. There's actually a couple of them towards the end of March, and he's kind of giving us some scientific background on that, plus how that can be tied to biblical events as far as signs in the heavens. So I want you guys to see this as well.
Comets headed in our direction. I already know what you're thinking, like, oh, Begley, please don't bring this to me. We don't want to hear any more about your asteroids and your comets. Well, asteroid TX68 did exactly like we told you it would do. It would come very close. It'd come within 2.5 million miles of the Earth. It's coming back in September. NASA's extremely concerned because it's coming back in September of 2017. And it brought with it a cluster of 5 asteroids, all of which were less than 300,000 miles from the planet Earth. So everything we told you would happen did. And also you have to understand what time of the prophetic clock that is ticking. How close are we to the end times? Well, now we have two comets that are going to go by the Earth in the next 2 weeks, approximately the same day, and that's March 21st, 22nd, right in there. These two comets are going to go by the Earth. One of them is going to be a little over 2 million miles from the Earth. The other a little over 3 million miles to the Earth. You say, then what are we worried about? Because of the top 20 comets that have ever gone by the Earth in history, these two will be listed in the top 20 as closest to the Earth. So think of all of history. We have a list right now of 20 comets that's ever went by the Earth. And BP Earthwatch has a great video on this in which he actually shows you the chart. These two comets that are going to go by the Earth in the next 2 weeks will both make it to the top 20 list of closest comets in history. And they're happening at the same time. Are you serious? Are you serious? Now, matter of fact, let me tell you what the name of the comets are. The first comet is Comet 2016 BA14. That's Comet 2016 BA14. Now, it was just discovered in December, so we didn't even know it was out there. And it's going to come within a little over 2 million miles from the Earth here in the next 2 weeks. Now, they believe this comet was, this is the closest really we've seen. This comet here may have been out there at some point. They're not sure about its orbital path, but it could have went by the Earth some 246 years ago, but they're not sure of that, of course, because they just now officially discovered it. Now, we have another comet, and that's Comet 252P Linear. That's 252P Linear. Now, this comet they've known about for a long time. They've known about it for almost 6,000 days, and they've been watching it. They didn't know about the other one, and it just so happens that that Comet 2016 BA14 shows up. We just spotted it in December, and they're both going to go by the Earth at the same time. It's an extraordinary event. It's not going to hit us, okay? So whenever that day passes and we don't get hit, don't send me 10,000 emails about, Begley, you're a false prophet, and how come the world hasn't come to an end? The world may come to an end before we get to these comets. You need to understand that. I'll just say it this way. Jesus could come. No man knows the day nor the hour. the Son of Man cometh. So you might want to be ready. But prophetically, if you look at the Bible, there are some events I really believe have to still come to pass. But God is in control of this whole thing. Now, having said that, Gil Brazard has done a great job. We know about how he has been studying and calculating Planet X, or he calls it Planet 7X, or Nibiru. And we know now, finally, after he's been talking about it for 7 years, finally NASA confirms it's out there. And they didn't tell us that till December. But then we go back and I found articles in 1983 where NASA had confirmed there was a Planet X or Nibiru. All right, so we know that Gil Brazard, who's been able to track it back through historical accounts of the Bible and ancient records, can prove that 14 different times in the Bible, Planet X must have went by and caused 14 biblical apocalyptic events to take place on the earth. During the days of Jonah and Nineveh, to the days of Hezekiah and the sundial going back 10 degrees, to the days of the brimstone that fell on the enemies that were fighting Joshua. All of these events could be tied to the arrival of Planet X. Now let me just say this. So Gil Brazard is watching not only again another return of Planet X or Nibiru or Planet 7X, but he also watches out for the wars and the famines and the economic unrest that would be going on at the same time, according to the Bible in the book of Revelation, when you read chapter 8, when it talks about these deep impacts that the earth will eventually have. So Gil Brazard does a good job, I think very well, in managing that or monitoring that. Now, BP Earthwatch at the same time studies the solar flares on the sun and its effects on the earth with earthquakes and the slippage of tectonic plates and tsunamis and those types of effects. So he really keeps a close eye on what's going on in space, not only with comets and asteroids and meteorites, but he keeps a close eye on the effects of the sun, the solar flares, and how that affects the earth with earthquakes. And then I come into the picture by doing this. I haven't had that discussion. By the way, I've not discussed this with these other two gentlemen. I've had them both on my show, but I've never put it together in this perspective. I look at not only comets, asteroids, and wars and rumors of wars, and earthquakes and solar flares and famines and diseases, but I'm looking at, those are all apocalyptic signs, but I'm managing or studying, if you will, the intent of men's hearts. Because one of the apocalyptic signs in Matthew 24 is because iniquity abounds, the love of many would wax cold. I'm also monitoring Israel as the timepiece, God's prophetic timepiece. I'm watching that closely. And when I see the rise within of the beast, the New World Order, when I see the surrounding of armies around Israel, and when I've been to Jerusalem and met with leading rabbis, and can literally walk through the Temple Institute and stood up on the Mount Moriah and the Temple Mount and begin to realize as I'm talking to rabbis that they are absolutely going toward the building of the third temple. Not that we need it as Christians. No, our body's the temple of the Holy Ghost. I know that. You know that. But prophetically, Daniel said when talks about the abomination of desolation, and Jesus in Matthew 24 again talks about when you see this abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet. And Jesus tells us it's going to happen. Matter of fact, Paul explains it to us in 2 Thessalonians 2. So, having said that, we have two comets that are going to go by the earth in 2 weeks. They're not going to hit us. This is not apocalyptic, catastrophic events, but it is signs in the heavens. And the Bible says that, and Jesus said in Luke, he said there will be great signs and fearful sights in the heavens. And Jesus said there'll be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, and men's hearts failing them for fear of things coming upon the earth, for the power of heaven shall be shaken. But there's one more great sign besides all of these things I just explained to you. And that's the sign of the coming of Jesus Christ, and the fact that the elite are already building bunkers under the ground to hide themselves from the face of him that sits on the throne. And there's a sign of the end times harvest. the cyber revival that's taking place is a part of the end time great revival of people being saved, born again, and coming into the kingdom of God. That is also one of the greatest signs you'll ever see, and that's the strengthening of the church in the last days and the numbers of people that will be coming to Christ despite the persecution. Today I just looked at a list of the 50 worst nations of the world persecuting Christians. I read the list and it was just shocking to me. I'm telling you, we're in the last days. Persecution's great upon the Christians, but the salvations are coming in record numbers. The apocalyptic signs are everywhere. All of it is the birthing pains pointing to the coming of Jesus Christ. Are you saved? See, all these things are important, collectively at once. 2 comments, 2 weeks. Will we survive it? Well, the earth will probably. It's not going to hit us. But the question is, will you survive these end times? Give your life to Jesus Christ. Get the joy of the Lord. It's your strength. And you have nothing to fear. The Lord hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind.
Finally, we've got a clip from SkyWatch on Tom Horn talking about his book, Zenith 2016. And he's talking about all the events that are being talked about in this coming year, 2016, and the convergence of events that are being talked about, not just by Christians, but by the Jewish rabbis, as well as other cults and belief systems throughout the world. So it sounds like, according to this, 2016 has a lot of potential and a lot of prophetic significance. So I just wanted you guys to hear what he has to say about that, and we'll let you check it out and see what you think.
Probably one of the most incredible periods of study for me and research. And a lot of people that have read Zenith 2016, they say that's my magnum opus. It's the best thing I ever did. And it's probably because it was actually the last time I had an entire year that I could dedicate to just doing research and writing. So it was timely. But what had happened was, as you know, everybody in 2005, 6, 7, 8, they were all saying that the Maya had said that the world was going to end in the year 2012, right? And so I, at that time, had just kind of a mild curiosity about it, but I wanted to find out, what did the Maya really say? Is this all just a bunch of New Agers? They're making up stuff, or they're kind of, misquoting the Maya, or what was going on? And so I wound up getting the research information from an academic by the name of Richard Luxton. And he was the guy that befriended the modern Maya and got permission from them after he gained their trust to translate a book called the Book of the Kumiel, or the Council Book of the Yucatecan Maya, that had been written down over 500 years ago, and he translated it into English. And so his was the work that I was following, and was learning that no, the Maya never said the world was going to end in the year 2012. What they said was more interesting to me because it started sounding very much like the prophecy off the Great Seal of the United States, the Novus Ordo Seclorum.
Yeah.
What they were saying was, at the end of the long count in December 21st, 2012, essentially the cosmos was going to roll over into a final age of mankind, a final epoch that would witness some stuff that sounded like it was taken right out of the book of Revelation. 2 great men would appear on the earth, sounded like the false prophet and the Antichrist. And then the judgment of God with famine and pestilence, and sounding like the Great Tribulation,
very much so,
right?
yeah.
So I started really getting into it, but I literally sat up in bed one night after I had read where Richard Luxton wrote this. He said, the dates that accompany the illustrations. Now he's talking about the jaguar shaman here, the Chilambalam, and some stuff that he had written, stuff that he had said, and provided even diagrams. But he was a convert to Christianity as a result of the Spanish missionaries, the jaguar shaman. So he was mixing his Mayan beliefs with what he was finding in the apocryphal books of the Bible, right? And he was prophesying about the end. And what Luxton said was, he focused on the final 13 Katuns, which is a period of 19.7 years. I don't want to get us buried here in details, right? But he said that final 13-stepped countdown began in what he called the colonial count, 1776.
Whoa!
Which would be followed by 13 steps and then the return of their God. And those 13 steps were 19.7 years. So I'm laying there in bed one night, I'm saying, boy, these prophecies of the Chilambalam sure remind me of the Sybil. And wait a minute, 1776, that's the base of the uncapped pyramid on the Great Seal,
Yes.
which also is 13 steps. And some of the leading American Freemasons had always said that those 13 steps represented distinct periods of time. And so I got out, my copy of the Great Seal, 1776, started counting the cartoons, 19.7 years, and saw where if you got to the top, right beneath the all-seeing eye would be the year 2012. But I also found out that the Gregorian calendar, our calendar,
Yeah.
the equivalent of the cartoon was 20 years, and that ended in 2016, 3.5 years later. So I literally came out of my bed and said, wait a minute, this can't possibly, if it's a coincidence, it's a doozy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To have 1776, 13 steps over which is hanging the all-seeing eye. And so that kind of launched me in the book Zenith 2016. And what people will find when they get that book and read it, they'll be astonished at how over thousands of years and from all kinds of cultures that had no connection. This was before the internet and iPhones and all that, right? No way to communicate. They all were fixating on the year 2012 and 2016. The Maya were fixated on it. The Aztec had their own cosmology about the end time, and they talked about the year 2012. Soon after, they said, Bolan Yakteku, the god of the underworld, who is down there guarding the bones of the giants. They say he holds the key to the bottomless pit. In Mayan cosmology, they say he's going to rise up to the surface of the earth and the giants are going to come with him. And then these 9 support gods are going to descend down from the heavens. So it sounds like great deception, and the pit is opening up from the book of Revelation, and the giants are coming up out of the earth.
The Aeneid.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
So, but one thing led to the other. I found that Jonathan Edwards, at the turn of the century, writing letters at the university level saying the Antichrist will appear in the year 2016. We found in the Zohar, because I had sent out this email. When this came to me in a revelation, I got up and got on my computer, right? Emailed every smart person I know. Everybody's smarter than me. I need to ask you a question, right? And it was, do you know of any connection with the Great Seal of the United States and Mayan prophecy? And we can talk a bit more about how I connected those dots in a moment. But J.R. Church, right, who used to lead Prophecy in the News and got cancer, died a few years ago, he emailed me back and he said, Tom, he said, I don't know anything about the Great Seal, but he said, did you know that in the Zohar, the rabbis from 700 years ago pinpointed when the Messiah would appear? And in the Zohar, in the Vieira section of the Zohar, he showed me this. I went and read it and found it. And, it said that in the year 5773, the Messiah will make himself known privately to the rabbis in Israel. 5773 in the in the Jewish calendar was 2012 to 2013 in the Gregorian calendar. So that was what JR wanted me to know, that they had saw the year 2012 too, right?
Yeah.
Another group of people 700 years ago writing in medieval Aramaic. And this book, of course, the Zohar, is very important to Kabbalistic rabbis, mystical rabbis. And so anyway, I found that. What I've noticed is interesting is the way that it's written in there. It sounds like it is even part of the prophecy of the popes, in that they say that the Messiah will appear in Jerusalem in 2012 to 2013, make himself known to the rabbis in Jerusalem, and sometime after that, he will begin making himself known to the people of the world. Well, you and I know that since then until even just this last week, major rabbis in Israel, several of them, their most respected rabbis, saying that the Messiah is here and his manifestation is imminent, even telling the kids that are going to their, to the rabbi schools not to leave Jerusalem and be traveling. It's that imminent. It's that close to
And
him.
they're pointing to very specific prophecies issued by rabbis from several hundred years ago. The Vilna Gaon is one in particular. The genius of Vilna, which is the capital of Lithuania, said that the Messiah would appear after Russia took Constantinople, which is Istanbul,
Right.
And the Crimea. Now, of course, Russia captured the Crimea from Ukraine in spring of 2014, and now with the feud going on between Russia and Turkey, the Russians still haven't really paid back Turkey for shooting down that plane in November.
There are videos from 2008 and 2009 where I was doing shows with Gary Stearman on Prophecy in the News and Sid Roth, and I was saying that's not what the Maya said. They're not saying the earth is going to end in 2012. What they were saying was more interesting, and it sounds very much like they were, they're quoting the Novus Ordo Seclorum, that there is going to come the dawn of a final age of man. Now, here's another thing that's very interesting is when you read the Novus Ordo Seclorum and Anuet Coeptus, these are taken from Virgil's Aeneid and his Eclogue, in which he's actually quoting the Cumae Sibyl, the most powerful Sibyl or Sibylline prophetess, who was a prophetess of the god Apollo.
Yes. Apollyon.
What the New Testament would call Apollyon, the very spirit that's going to come up out, there he comes, Bolanyak Teku and all the giants, right? From their mythos to ours, because demons also know that this is going to happen. And so they try to capture those stories, misguide people into making it appear as if they're the ones with the revelation. Like the Sibylline prophetess did in the New Testament, where she's following the Apostle Paul around saying, these are men of God, in order to try to stake some kind of claim that she too is a true prophetess
and so Paul
of God.
drove the demon out of her. Yeah.
So he gets frustrated and casts the demon out of her, and then everybody's mad now.
Yeah.
But so now these rabbis, though, they're behaving as if they're either total believers or somebody has made himself known to them, because that's actually how they're talking. They're saying he's here and he's going to manifest himself. Now you've got a pope who also is a believer in prophecy. He not only is a believer in prophecy, he's also started to prophesy, and that's kind of spooky. He's now telling people, get ready, the end is here, you need to prepare yourself. He's saying these things so many bases in this one show, but this even goes into the ISIS apocalyptic vision, where they believe that Muhammad showed them, 400 some years ago, or at least a hadith ascribes him prophesying this war that would come at the end of time. But they've made a video that shows them marching on Rome behind the Colosseum, and they come down into Rome. But they're, in their apocalyptic end time vision, there will be an army called the Army of Rome. Maybe something is going to happen. This is what I suspect. Something is going to happen. Maybe ISIS uses a weapon of mass destruction, which then causes a coalition army to come together. But the Pope calls for the rejuvenation of the Christian rules for just war.
Just war.
And if he does do that, as far as both the world and the Muslims would see this as a battle being fought under the banner of Rome. So it really feels like there are a lot of people that believe that the year 2016, and they have for thousands of years, is very, very significant. Now, we're going to find out. By the way, I'm not saying that in 2016, we're going to enter the Great Tribulation or the Antichrist is going to appear or anything else. What I am saying is when you read that book, you'll find out that dozens of people for thousands of years did say that. And that's really the question of the book. Why?
Well, why were the disciples inspired to ask Jesus himself, what are the signs of the end of the age?
Yeah, what are the signs of the end of the age? And as David Flynn, our old friend that's, in heaven now, talking this over with people smarter than I am, obviously.
But his brother Mark is carrying on.
But he said that he was talking about the precision of the equinoxes and that sort of thing, David, right?
Oh, gosh.
I can barely quote him well.
Josh
I'm
Peck
thinking.
could follow it.
But he said that the conditions of the stars were exactly the same in the days of Noah as they would be following the year 2012. So that when Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, he was talking about the alignment of the planets and a lot of other really deep things being the same as
If that's new to you, by the way, you have the David Flynn collection.
Yeah, we do have the David Flynn collection. They can get it and read greater minds than mine. But the Cherokee Indians, 200 years ago, and you can get these at the academic level. They're called the Chickamauguan Star Constellation prophecies, or more simply, the rattlesnake prophecies.
Yeah. 200
some years ago, they go into a whole apocalyptic frenzy, and they write down how in the year 2012. The end of this era will come. Following that will be a final era of mankind. But they saw the return of what the Aztec would call Quetzalcoatl, what the Maya call Kukulkan, right? This serpent that has the power of air, sometime shortly thereafter, 2012, returning. Well, this is the book of Revelation, and this great war between God and the dragon, right? And once again, we started the show out early with me saying I literally sat up in bed one day because I'm reading the Maya saying 1776, 13-step countdown, then the return of their God. Well, that's the symbolism on the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States, where it's got 1776, 13 steps, and then the all-seeing eye. And I did want to know if that was just an amazing coincidence or if the early Freemasons were influenced by the belief of the Mesoamericans. So I started doing the research, and when people get the book, Zenith 2016, because there's 2 or 3 chapters dedicated to this paper trail, if you will, they'll find out that you know, Manly P. Hall and others said that all of the most esoteric knowledge of the American Freemasons came from the red men out of Mesoamerica. So you start finding out they were heavily influenced, but we found even more evidence than that. There was an Italian painter who was famous by the name of Constantino Brumidi, and he worked for the Vatican and he worked for the churches in Rome doing paintings and stuff. Well, he migrates to the United States in the 1800s. He becomes an American citizen and goes to work for the Jesuits in New York, who were considered at that time to be kind of the real power, right? And certainly Rome's presence and influence in the Americas in those early years. But abruptly in 1854, they send Brumidi to go to Mexico. For what purpose? To make copious notes of the Aztec calendar stone that ends in the year 2012, right? He comes back from that trip. He goes directly to Washington, D.C., where he meets with Quartermaster General Montgomery C. Meigs, who was the guy that was supervising the construction of the dome, the U.S. Capitol Dome and the wings of the dome. He's appointed to be, you know, the official government painter. And boy, this could be several shows. He goes inside the U.S. Capitol Dome and goes up into the belly of Isis, right? The dome. And he paints the apotheosis of George Washington. George Washington becoming a god. Now, you guys had Mike Heiser on recently talking about the divine council and the 70 angels that were given authority over the nations and then they fell. Well, if you follow that through history, and nobody knows exactly when this happened, but in Gnostic Christianity and in the Rosicrucian and some of the early occult movement, the 70 angels became 72. Nobody knows exactly when or why that happened, but they became 72. Well, in the apotheosis of Washington, right below it are 72 pentagrams for the purpose of controlling these angels that are over the world. It's highly occultic in nature. Right below that is what's called the frieze of American history. Now, if you can still, I think you can still go on a tour of the Capitol Dome. Go inside and stand under the dome. Look at the frieze of American history. And of all of the things that Constantino Brumidi could have painted, right, in the frieze of American history, he paints Montezuma and Cortez meeting each other, and here is the giant Aztec calendar stone that came to its conclusion in the year 2012. But right below that, he paints what's called the sacred fire, which means it relit in December of 2012 to give birth to a final era of mankind. So we were able to find fabulous evidence that the Freemasons were very much aware of the belief system of the Maya and did incorporate it not just into the Great Seal. The entire city is laid out as an ancient Egyptian grid with the dome. It's based on the story of Isis and Osiris. But the purpose of those are to serve as a generator to draw the seed of Osiris out of the underworld so that he could be incarnate in the Pharaoh so that Egypt would have divine representation. And we found out that every inauguration of every American president across town at the House of the Temple, the Herodome, the official headquarters of the 33rd degree Freemasons, every time a president's inaugurated, they conduct the raising of Osiris ceremony so that America can have divine representation, but more so that this prophecy can someday be fulfilled and that the leader of America will become Osiris, Apollo, incarnate, what the New Testament would call the arrival of the Antichrist.
All right, that's all I got for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you again next time.